All right, so today we're diving into How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah, classic.
It really is. It's one of those books that I feel like everyone's heard of,
Hmm.
but maybe not everyone's actually read.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even if you haven't read it, you've probably encountered the ideas
Right.
in some form or another.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
today we're going to kind of unpack those core principles
Yes.
and look at how they're still so relevant today.
Yeah, what's amazing is how practical this book is.
Yeah.
It's not just theory. It's like he gives you actual steps you
Yes,
can
yeah.
take to improve your relationships and your communication.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. Like, how can you actually use these principles
Right.
in your everyday life?
Yeah.
So the book starts off talking about handling people. And one of the things that really struck me was how much Carnegie emphasizes what not to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, he's really big on avoiding criticism, condemnation, complaints.
Yeah, he's like, don't do that.
Right. And there's this great quote where he says,
Oh, yeah.
any fool can criticize, condemn, and complain, and most fools do. But it takes character and self-control to be understanding and forgiving.
That's so true. And I think it speaks to something really fundamental about human nature. You know,
Yeah.
when we feel criticized, our immediate reaction is to get defensive.
Yeah.
But when we feel understood and appreciated, we're much more open to hearing what other people have to say.
Right. And I think that's so powerful because it shifts the whole dynamic of the interaction.
Yeah.
It's not about being right or wrong.
Right.
It's about creating a space where people feel safe to be themselves.
Exactly. And where they feel like they can grow and learn.
Yeah. And so how do we balance that?
Yeah.
Like acknowledging someone's efforts,
Yeah.
but also addressing areas where they need to improve. Like, it can't just be all sunshine and rainbows.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. You're absolutely right. It's not about ignoring problems or pretending everything is perfect.
Yeah.
But it is about recognizing that everyone is trying to do their best. And instead of tearing them down, we should focus on building them up.
I love that. And I think a lot of times we focus on what people are doing wrong
Yeah, it's easy to do.
instead of what they're doing right.
Exactly.
And I think even pointing out areas for improvement can be done in a way that's constructive.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you can frame it in a way that's focused on how those improvements can actually benefit the individual
Right.
and help them grow.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I think sometimes we're afraid to give positive feedback.
Right.
Like we think it's going to make people complacent,
Oh,
but actually the opposite is true.
interesting.
When people feel appreciated and valued, they're more motivated to do their best.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And, I've seen this in my own life. Like, I used to have this colleague who was really challenging to work with,
Oh,
and everyone would tiptoe around him because they were afraid to say anything that might set him off.
yeah, I've definitely been there.
So I decided to try something different.
What did you do?
I started focusing on acknowledging his expertise
Okay.
and the positive aspects of his work.
How did that go?
It was amazing. It completely shifted the dynamic.
Really?
Instead of feeling defensive, he became more collaborative,
Wow.
more open to feedback.
That's amazing.
It was really
It's
powerful.
like you're changing the whole energy
Yeah,
of the interaction.
absolutely. And it's like Carnegie says, be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise.
I love that.
Right,
And it's not about being insincere.
right.
It's about finding the genuine good in people and acknowledging it.
Exactly. And I think the more we practice that,
Yeah.
the better we get at it.
Becomes a habit.
Yes.
Like a muscle.
It does. It does. And it shapes our interactions and ultimately our relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that leads us perfectly into the next section of the book, which is all about making yourself likable. So Carnegie outlines 6 specific ways to do this. Becoming genuinely interested in others, smiling, remembering, and using people's names, being a good listener, talking in terms of the other person's interests, and making people feel important.
It's like a checklist for being a decent human being.
It really is. It's like the basics of good social skills.
Yeah.
But what's funny is how often we overlook these things.
Right. Like, we know we should do them,
Yeah,
but we don't always put them into practice.
exactly. And I think one of the most important ones, especially in today's digital world, is being a good listener.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, think about it. How often are we truly present and engaged in conversations, or are we just waiting for our turn to speak?
Oh, I'm totally guilty of that sometimes.
Yeah, me too. It's so easy to get distracted, especially with our phones, constantly buzzing with the notifications.
And it's like we're so used to multitasking
Yeah.
that we forget how to just be present with
Yeah.
another person.
And here's the thing, genuine listening goes beyond just hearing words. It's about making eye contact, asking clarifying questions, showing the speaker that you're truly absorbing what they're saying.
Right.
It's about making them feel heard and understood, and that's powerful.
Absolutely. And how do we apply that in the digital age, though?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Like, it's hard to convey that same level of presence and attention
Yeah.
through a text message or even a video call.
It is. It's definitely a challenge, but
Yeah.
there are ways to adapt. Like, for example, when you're texting, try to respond in a way that shows you've read and understood the message.
Right.
Don't just fire off a quick, okay, or got it.
Yeah.
Ask a follow-up question, make a comment.
So it's about being more intentional.
Exactly,
Yeah.
even in those quick digital interactions.
Yeah.
And when you're on a video call, try to minimize distractions, make eye contact with the camera, use body language to show you're engaged.
It's like we have to be more mindful of our digital body language,
Absolutely.
just like we are in person.
Exactly. And, this brings up an important point for you, dear listener. How can you adapt these principles to your online interactions?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right?
Like, think about the platforms you use most, the people you connect with,
Yeah.
and how you can apply these ideas to foster more meaningful connections.
Yeah. That's something to really think about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So much to think about there. But let's move on to another of Carnegie's big ideas, winning others to your way of thinking.
Yeah. This one's really interesting.
It really is. It kind of surprised me because he starts off by saying, avoid arguments.
Right. And you'd think a book about influence would be all about, like winning debates and persuasive tactics.
Exactly.
But Carnegie was really onto something here. He understood that arguing rarely changes anyone's mind. In fact, it usually just makes people more entrenched in their own beliefs.
So how can you get someone to see your point of view if you don't engage in debate?
Well, Carnegie believed that the key to persuasion lies in understanding and empathy. So before you even try to present your own perspective, you need to make a genuine effort to understand where the other person is coming from.
So you're not just trying to win.
Right.
You're trying to connect.
Exactly. It's about building a bridge of understanding.
I like that.
Right.
But isn't there a risk that this could lead to inaction? Like, what if someone is advocating for something harmful or unethical?
That's a great question, and it highlights the importance of using these principles with wisdom and discernment,
Right.
Empathy doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior.
Right.
It means trying to understand the motivations and beliefs that are driving that behavior.
Okay.
And once you have a deeper understanding,
Yeah.
then you can start to engage in a more productive dialogue.
It's about finding that common ground,
Exactly.
even if you don't agree on everything.
Right. And, this feels especially challenging in today's world where everyone seems so polarized.
Oh, absolutely. It's like everywhere you look, it's us versus them.
Right. And social media definitely doesn't help.
It's like an echo chamber.
It is. But I think that's exactly why Carnegie's approach is more relevant now than ever.
Okay.
We need to rediscover the art of civil discourse,
I love that.
of listening with an open mind and engaging with empathy even when we disagree.
So how do we actually do this? I mean, it's easy to say be empathetic,
Yeah.
but putting it into practice can be really tough.
It definitely takes practice, and it's not always easy. But here are a few techniques you can try.
Okay.
First, focus on active listening. Really try to understand the other person's perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Okay.
Ask clarifying questions, summarize their points to make sure you're understanding them correctly,
Mm-hmm.
and validate their feelings.
So instead of immediately jumping in with a counter argument, you're taking the time to really hear them.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly disarming.
Yeah.
It shows that you're not just trying to win a debate,
Right.
but that you're genuinely interested in understanding their point of view.
Okay. What else?
Second, look for areas of agreement, even in the most heated disagreements. There are often points on which you can find common ground.
Right. It's like finding those little islands of agreement
Exactly.
and a sea of disagreement.
Yes, and that can help to create a more collaborative atmosphere.
Okay. I like that. And finally,
Focus on building relationships, not winning arguments.
ooh, that's a good one.
At the end of the day, people are more likely to be persuaded by someone they trust and respect.
So it all circles back to that core idea of connection.
Exactly. And that's something we can all work on, no matter what our beliefs or opinions may be.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm ready to shift gears a bit and talk about part 4 of the book, where Carnegie dives into leadership.
Okay.
One of his principles that really stood out to me was praise every improvement, no matter how small.
I love that one.
I'm curious to hear your take on that.
Well, I think it speaks to the power of positive reinforcement and recognizing effort. Carnegie believed that people thrive on encouragement
Yeah.
and that even small improvements deserve to be acknowledged.
I see the value in that.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk of setting the bar too low? Like if you're constantly praising people for minor achievements, won't it dilute the impact of praise for truly exceptional work?
That's a valid concern, and it highlights the importance of being specific and genuine in your praise.
Okay.
It's not about showering people with empty compliments for every little thing they do.
Right.
It's about recognizing their effort and progress
Okay.
and expressing your appreciation in a way that feels authentic and meaningful.
So it's not just saying good job.
Yeah.
It's about being specific.
Exactly. For example, let's say you have a team member who has been struggling with a new software program.
Okay.
Instead of just focusing on the areas where they're still making mistakes, you could say something like, I've noticed you've been putting in extra effort to master this new software, and it's really paying off. You're picking it up quickly, and I'm impressed with your progress.
That feels much more genuine
Right.
and encouraging than just a generic good job.
Exactly. And that kind of specific positive feedback can be incredibly motivating. It helps people feel seen and valued, and it encourages them to keep striving for improvement.
It's like you're watering a plant. You're giving it the nourishment it needs to grow and flourish.
I love that analogy.
And this brings us to an important point about leadership.
Yeah.
It's not about wielding power or control.
Right.
It's about empowering others
Right.
and helping them reach their full potential.
Absolutely. And that's a powerful legacy for any leader to leave behind.
All right, this has been so insightful. I'm really starting to see how Carnegie's principles can be applied to so many different aspects of our lives.
Me too.
But before we wrap up, I think it's important to address some of the criticisms that have been leveled at how to win friends and influence people.
Sure.
Some people argue that it's outdated, that it's too focused on manipulation, or that it doesn't address the complexities of modern relationships.
Yeah, those are valid concerns, and it's important to engage with those critiques and think critically about how these principles should be applied.
So let's dive into those criticisms and see how they hold up. So we were about to dive into some of those criticisms
Yeah.
of how to win friends and influence people.
Right. Like, is it really all it's cracked up to be, or is there more to the story?
Exactly. What are some of the common concerns that you hear?
Well, one of the biggest ones is that, people worry that Carnegie's principles can be used for manipulation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if you're only being nice to someone because you want something from them,
Right.
is that really genuine?
It's like you're using the techniques,
Right.
but not really embodying the
Yeah.
spirit of them.
Exactly. And that's where intention comes in.
Okay.
Carnegie himself emphasized the importance of sincerity.
Hmm.
Like, these principles are meant to be tools for building genuine connections,
Right.
not for manipulating people.
So it's not about putting on a mask
Right.
or pretending to be someone you're not.
Exactly.
It's about really tapping into our own
Yeah.
desire to connect.
And treating people with kindness and respect.
Right.
Right.
What about the criticism that some of his advice feels outdated?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like especially in today's digital world.
Right, like remembering names is great in theory,
Yeah.
but when you're interacting with so many people online, it's like...
Right. How do you even keep track?
Right.
Yeah. But I think the underlying principle is still relevant, which is, making people feel valued and appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we adapt that principle to the digital age?
Yeah.
Right? So instead of remembering names,
Yeah.
maybe we focus on remembering details about people's lives,
Okay.
their interests, their recent accomplishments.
You can use social media to your advantage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Take note of what people are sharing.
Right.
Use that information to connect with them on a more personal level.
It's like you have this whole database
You do.
of information
Yeah.
at your fingertips.
And it's about using it wisely and ethically.
Right. Okay, so what about the argument that Carnegie's book oversimplifies
Oh, yeah.
complex issues?
For sure.
Like it doesn't really address things like power dynamics,
Right.
cultural differences,
Right.
societal inequalities.
Those are all valid points. And, it's important to acknowledge that Carnegie's book isn't a cure-all. It's not going to solve all of society's problems.
It's a framework
Right.
for improving individual interaction.
Exactly.
But that doesn't mean we should ignore
Right.
those larger systemic issues.
Absolutely.
It's like they both exist at the same time.
They do. And we need to be mindful of both.
Yeah.
Right? We need to work towards a more just and equitable world while also striving to improve our individual relationships.
So it's about using Carnegie's principles responsibly and ethically,
Exactly.
recognizing both their power and their limitations.
Yeah,
I think that's a really important point to make.
it is.
Because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
how to win friends and influence people is about human connection.
It is.
It's about understanding ourselves and others better
Mm,
and using that understanding to build more meaningful relationships.
absolutely.
And I think that's something that will always be relevant,
I agree.
no matter how much the world changes.
Yeah, it's timeless wisdom.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into how to win friends and influence people, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away?
I hope they come away feeling empowered
Okay.
to build stronger, more authentic relationships.
Love that.
And, realizing that influence isn't about manipulation or control.
Right.
It's about genuine connection,
Mhm.
empathy, understanding.
And those are skills
They are.
that anyone can develop
Absolutely.
with practice and intention.
It's a journey.
It is a journey, and it never really ends.
It does.
There's always more to learn, more to grow,
Yeah,
more ways to connect.
absolutely.
Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation.
It has.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive
My pleasure.
into how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed it
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
and that you'll take these insights with you
Yes.
as you navigate the world and build those meaningful connections.
Absolutely.
That's a wrap for today.
Yeah.
We'll see you on our next deep dive.
See you later.